Channel Red Novel Chapter 2026, Return of Favor, Part 1. Surprisingly for Quinn, the teachers had stepped in more than he could have ever imagined. The settlement had certainly changed compared to the old. There was, of course, always a sour taste in his mouth because of the current leader who seemed to never be there, but since the change of leaders and everyone listening to a single person at the top, it had done so for the better. Of course, there were always people or individuals that would act out, or didn't see things in the same way, but these problems, for some reason, seemed small for Quinn. Inwardly, there was a smile on his face as he thought about what had occurred. I solved the issue without having to use any of my powers. Well, I stopped a single attack, but that wasn't enough to make me suspicious. With that, I hope that's the end of that matter. Quinn thought. Eventually, he had reached the start of the route for the guard's duty for the day. Here Ronkin was waiting for him, his body and face looked nicely healed and it was time for them to start their work. So, Ronkin started the conversation. Are you going to tell me what happened yesterday? You left suddenly in the middle of the match. After seeing you take part, I thought you were going to win that little tournament of ours. I was excited to see someone else win for a change. Quinn had honestly almost forgotten about the tournament yesterday. He was far too focused on the events that had transpired today. There was still a worry in the back of his mind whether Minnie was going to be okay. The only thing that made him somewhat relieved was the fact that the teachers cared, and he felt like his little act was good enough to scare others away. Right. I'm sorry there was a problem at the school that I had to attend to. Quinn replied. What happened at the tournament yesterday after I left? Did Nell win again? The tournament wasn't a serious event, but he still didn't like the fact that one of the guards was drinking Dalki blood as an unfair advantage, so he was hoping that at least he didn't win the prize. With the blood, the others would never win, it was an uneven playing field. Your daughter. Ronkin was surprised. I hope she's okay. When I got home I heard that a big incident had happened at the school, as well. A kid had been beaten until his bones could be seen sticking out of his leg. It looked like the rumor had already spread around the settlement, only it wasn't a rumor and Quinn's daughter was the one that had caused the problem. Anyway, Nell actually decided to call the tournament off after you ran like that. He said he was worried that the guards might be called into action and if they arrived at the scene injured like so they might get quite a telling off. While continuing their rounds at work, there was a commotion at one of the markets. One of the older vampires that looked like an old woman was shouting at two young vampires that were looking to buy some weapons from her stall. In cases like this, both Ronkin and Quinn were meant to be the mediators, as they listened to both sides of the story and tried to calm the two of them down. Ronkin was talking to the two young adults while Quinn was talking to the older woman. Those two boys bought an advanced tier weapon from me the other day. They came back to return it, and although it's the same type of sword, they have come back with an intermediate weapon. Asking for me to give them their money back. The thing was, I was sure around a week ago I sold an intermediate weapon of the same type. They're saying that I sold them an intermediate weapon when I'm positive I sold them an advanced weapon yesterday. From his experience, Quinn sensed that the woman had no signs of lying, while the others, when explaining their side of the story, had a fast-paced heart rate and slight sweat coming from their forehead. Signs indicating that they were lying. Just give us back our money and we'll call it even. One of the men said. Yeah, and in return for trying to scam us, let us keep the weapon as well. Never. The old woman shouted back. Let me go to your homes and search for the advanced weapon, I'm sure I'll find it in there. Are you calling me a thief? One of the young men shouted back. The scene and argument between the two was causing quite a commotion and in the end, one of the young men was at his limit, as he rushed forward. You can't just call me a thief without any proof. He lifted his hand, that started to gather his red aura, and it was aiming straight for the women. Ronkin was too late in trying to stop one of them, and was only able to stop the friend, but Quinn was close to them both. Looking at the man, Quinn had an idea to solve this without getting involved. As the man's hand was swinging in the air, the vampire aura around him was starting to diminish. The old woman raised her hand to block, and instead, her aura started to grow to great strength. The man looked shocked as his hit had done next to nothing. "How dare you try to attack me?" the woman shouted back as she continued to hit the other again and again. Eventually, using his inspect skill, Quinn was also able to find the advanced tier weapon wrapped up in a bag on one of their backs. "I'm assuming this is the weapon that you sold," Quinn said with a smile. The matter was resolved, and the two vampires were taken to their families as what had come to light was reported. As for how severe the punishment would be or what it would be, it was up to the families to decide. As they continued their route around the place, Quinn was thinking back to what he had done. The aura, from a certain distance he was able to control it. When he woke up 1,000 years later, Quinn was able to do this. He thought it was due to one of his titles, or maybe the fact that he had become a celestial, yet it was a skill he was still able to do. It was unable to work well against stronger vampires such as the original Edvard, but for certain situations, it was handy. Quinn had used it on Sonya when she went to attack him, and he had diminished it just now in a scuffle while also raising the weaker vampire as well. This power, it was a strong power, something that no vampire could do apart from him. In a way, Quinn was glad he had the power, because if one was to lead a vampire army, one could make them stronger or the other side weaker if there was a civil war to take place. Eventually the shift had come to an end, and it was time for the two of them to say goodbye to each other. As Ronkin was making his way home, he was thinking about the dispute today. You know, Quinn always seems to solve them quite easily compared to the stories I have heard. There was that time when one of the angry customers just backed down for no reason. When that kid fell out of the building, he landed perfectly fine on the floor, and even then, he was able to tell what weapon was advanced and intermediate. I couldn't tell the difference at all between the two. It was because of all of their work and the problems that had been resolved that the Ninth Family Guards had a good image, and the handsome guard had become quite a popular vampire among the whole settlement. On top of all that, he's a good fighter. Why am I only noticing these things now? Is it after I realized he's good at fighting? Are all those coincidences that take place actually not coincidences? There was even that time that a beast ran away. No, it couldn't be. I must just be overthinking things. Those that actually carried the Fortuna name and ability always had a level of luck, so Ronkin would just leave it to that at the end. Unfortunately for him though, he was wondering just when his luck would start. Opening the door to his house though, he quickly heard the sound of crying. It was a familiar sound, it was Ronkin's wife. Immediately he rushed to the room she was in, and could see her crying next to a strange person in a robe, and that's when he noticed that they were in their son's room. "This is Ronkin," his wife shouted. "The Ninth Family. They sent a great healer to help out our son. They say they can heal him. They say they can make him better, back to the way he was." That's when Ronkin realized, the tears were tears of joy. "I can't believe it. Why after all this time, would the Ninth Family send a healer?" To Ronkin's knowledge, the Ninth Family didn't even have such a healer that could perform such things. There was a human, however, that worked for the Greylash family that had the power, but the amount to pay a healer to get to their family or to heal a vampire was too large for them. It was one of the options that Ronkin was saving up for, and what he didn't know was this was the very healer. Only they were using a special spray to cover up their scent, and there were quite a few vampires that were close to the home sent to escort the individual. Outside of the home, far away from the eyes of the escort, Quinn had a happy smile on his face. "Edvard, thank you for this," Quinn said to himself. "I'm happy that I can still help out people even from the shadows." Inside the Ninth Castle, Mukka had just arrived with some urgent news. Jim Eno sends a message to all. A new supply of blood is being sent. They have been improved upon compared to the last. He hopes all leaders will continue to distribute the blood supply to those they feel are worthy. The vampire settlement must continue to grow. Edvard couldn't help but smile at the message that had been sent. We must continue to grow. I guess he will soon ask for some of us to join his expeditions. Before then it would be great if I could figure it out. Whose story is real? Are you really a fake, Jim Eno? We will have to see when you return to the settlement. Channel Red Novel Chapter 2027, Return a Favor, Part 2. The second day of school had started for Minnie, and it was safe to say all eyes were on her, and nearly everything the kids talked about was her father. However, she didn't mind hearing these words about her father because they weren't talked about in a bad light, and instead only good words could be heard. In the middle of the lessons, every time she heard someone talk about her father, about how cool he was, even repeating a few of his lines, she had to force herself to put her head down and smile. Does anyone know the answer to this question? Miss Bedford asked. One of the boys was waving his hands in the air, and as his name was picked, he stood up from his seat and cleared his throat. Miss Bedford, from today on I will always open the door. The others in the classroom laughed, as it was clear that he was putting on a voice and imitating what Quinn had said, about always opening the door for Minnie. Miss Bedford couldn't help but shake her head as she was concerned. Toby was still in the classroom. He didn't seem to be bothering Minnie or the others anymore and was actually quiet during the lesson for a change. The thing was, he was only a child, such a large event may have affected his life from now on. Miss Bedford wanted the kids to enjoy their life, but now maybe he was too scared to act like himself. When break began once again, Minnie was looking around the room. She wondered if she should just stay in the class. If she went out, she was afraid that others would make fun of her, but that was when she felt a presence by her side. Minnie, do you want to go out on break again today? Abby shyly asked. Really? Minnie asked back, over the moon. After what had occurred she wouldn't have been surprised if Abby never talked to her again. Not only did she get hurt because of Minnie, but she had also seen quite a cruel side to this little vampire. You helped me. My family says to always stick to those that help you, and you should stick to them when they need you as well. That's what makes good friends. Abby replied. Minnie couldn't help but give Abby a big hug. She felt like, outside of all of the adults that she would constantly meet, that for the first time she had truly made a real friend. It looked like school would go pretty well for her and her new friends in the playground, and without noticing it, Minnie had made quite a few fans. Jared and Hebe looked to always be watching in their direction. Are you worried? Hebe asked. No, of course not. Jared replied. All the leaders are present at the event. Which means there are a total of 9 direct positions. Do you really think none of them will take someone like me up? Oh, so that's your only aim? Hebe replied. Because I thought you would have liked to get first place at that little event, but it seems after taking just one punch of hers you have given up. You took the hit, you shouldn't give up so easily. Jared looked at his own fist. He was by the practice dolls in the playground once again. He didn't gather any aura and threw a punch out, hitting it in the head, causing it to bend so far back that the doll touched the floor before swinging back upright again. What if I told you? I think she was holding back when she hurt that child. Hebe couldn't help but laugh, but there was no smile on Jared's face. That's impossible. I mean, how can a vampire like that even exist? Who even is she? The next day had arrived, and as promised Quinn had taken her to school. What had come as a surprise or no surprise at all to some was Toby hadn't gone in that day, which meant there was no sight of Sonia anywhere. Still, Quinn led the door open like he said he would and continued his job as normal. While doing the rounds with Ronkin this time, there was a slight commotion at the gate. Ronkin had wanted to tell Quinn the good news of what had happened yesterday, but the commotion had stopped him from doing so. A group of local scouts, ones that would hunt beasts on the very planet they were on, had returned, but they had done so quite injured. They were a group of 10, one of them was missing an arm, others were badly bleeding, and 2 at the back looked to be carrying a lifeless body into the settlement. Will someone come help us? One of the men shouted at the front. Quinn, Ronkin, as well as other guards, quickly came to their side to give them a shoulder. Quinn had even gone to the man at the very back that looked lifeless, giving the other two a break from carrying the man. Unfortunately, Quinn could tell after touching him, there was no presence of life at all. They must have run into a few high-tier beasts. As time continues to pass on each planet, the level of beasts and higher-tier beasts will just continue to increase. Unless there are those that are strong enough to get rid of them. Quinn thought. It wasn't a rare sight to see injured scout groups, but it was rare to see one of the local ones look like this. The news and the scene had worried the local vampires, making them think that the settlement wasn't so safe after all. Yet, they still had yet to suffer a single attack, or a wave of beast attacks like the other planets received. The theory was the beasts could sense the strong power radiation off of the settlement. After all, there were beasts with some level of intelligence. A short while after one of the scout teams had returned, all of the guards had been called in for a meeting, to head in front of the 9th castle. Quinn and Ronkin had arrived and there were around 50 of them all wearing the same uniform. What surprised them though, was Mukka, and the leader himself, Edvard, was out during this meeting. "I have a message for you all," Edvard stated. "I'm sure you have all heard about the recent scout team being hurt on their last hunt. Unfortunately, this has been happening more regularly than I would like to admit. The families are worried that the current beast situation on the planet our very settlement is based on is getting out of hand. Which is why soon, a strong force will be sent out on an expedition. While they are away, you guards will have to do more than just patrol the area. There may be some of you that will be called out, to even join the others on hunts as well. I want you all to be prepared no matter what position you take, but please bear in mind that this will be a temporary measure. In return, you shall be given 2 level 3 flasks for the task. If they do not need to be used during this time, then you may keep them." Rather than sad news, many of the guards looked pleased. They were not only happy to receive the Dalki flasks but happy that they would be doing something different for a change. While Quinn was wondering, why didn't the leaders just leave the place and solve the matter themselves? Were they truly that lazy, or did they think the second they left someone would attack the settlement? When everyone was ready to leave, one of the permanent guards had come up to Quinn. "Sorry, but the leader has asked you to stay." Ronkin was wondering what it was about and wanted to stay as well, but everyone was soon moved out of the area, and now it was only the permanent guards, Mukka, and Edvard in the area. "Please let's head inside for a talk," Edvard suggested. Quinn shook his head, thinking that all of this special treatment might eventually get the two caught, but he was in a slightly good mood ever since Edvard had done what was asked. Entering the castle, the two of them went into a quiet room and not even Mukka was allowed. It looked like a study room. An office with several books on the side. "I will cut to the chase," Edvard said. "I would like you to go with the next scout hunting team, and join them on their expedition. You and I both know your strength, and I am afraid that the level of the beast might be one that not even they can handle with the boost of the flasks." "No," Quinn replied instantly. "I'm sorry," Edvard said, raising an eyebrow, not expecting to hear that answer yet. "But you haven't even heard what I am proposing. I told you the most important thing to me is my family, and my family is here in the settlement, so I will stay here," Quinn said. "You know, recently there was someone that aimed to cause some trouble for your family and I had put a stop to them," Edvard stated. "I am quite the capable person when it comes to protecting your family. I have done so for the last couple of months. I will continue to do so from the shadows like I have been doing. If you are worried about your daughter, I will have people watching her." "Ah, perhaps the one you are worried about is not her, but your wife." Quinn smiled at this comment, worried about his wife. Just like him, she could perhaps take out nearly every leader, including the originals. As long as they didn't take any Dalki blood to make themselves stronger. "I don't think she will need looking after, but I would still like to stay by her side," Quinn assured. Edvard sighed as he knew this was going to be a tough one, but maybe there was a way. The leaders can't leave the settlement to solve this matter. There is something stirring up that I can't quite talk to you about. Not unless you wish to reveal yourself to everyone, of course. But you see, I truly think that something will disturb the lives of those in the settlement. If that was to happen, then the peaceful life, of not just yours but those in the settlement, will be disturbed as well. Don't you agree? I will look after your family, I promise my whole life on that, and from your own words, they aren't even ones that need looking after. They can take care of things themselves. I am a fair person, Quinn. I promise, if you do me this favor now, then I will return the favor back to you. Even if it involves me finding out about a certain someone. A link to Jim Eno. This was perhaps what Quinn needed, a safe way to gather information. Channel Red Novel Chapter 2028, Lies, Part 1, Several feet were planted onto the ground as the flowers were crushed beneath them. A large group of vampires, around 10 in total, were trekking across the planet. The place where the vampire settlement was currently located, was a beast planet in the past, one that a faction known as the Daisy Faction, who were working for the Cursed Faction, was based. Although their time on the planet wasn't long, a lot of the planet had been changed. Many of those in the Daisy Faction had abilities related to plants, and even if they didn't, their love for different plants was unreal. Despite the lack of sunlight, it seemed like life on the planet hadn't faded at all. There were giant swirling and intertwining trees, colorful petals that gave off a faint glow, and prickly vines all over the place. The difficult terrain was actually one of the reasons why the vampires found it slightly difficult to hunt on their own planet, or at least get rid of the more dangerous beasts. Right now, the group was walking through a brightly lit and colored forest. All of the plants were giving off a strange glow, and there were even giant plants with thick bottoms that loomed over them, blocking the sky with their big leaves. In some ways it was like a jungle, in others it was more like a forest. As for the group of vampires, they weren't just any vampires, they were talented ones. Fighters that were a mix of strong vampires, and some were even at the noble evolution level. Since the last few scout teams had suffered a few losses, a strong team had been sent out this time, heading to the same location as they had done last. Remember everyone, we are to save our energy. The vampire at the front, who was a noble, wearing black with his hair slightly spiked up, and looked middle-aged with a few stripes on his shoulder, was leading the group. His name was Anton. He carried a rapier as his weapon of choice, but even though his weapon was thin like a needle, he swung it and cut through some of the tricky plants they had encountered so far. We are to come back to the settlement with good news, but more importantly, we will come back to them in one piece. I don't wish to lose anyone on this trip. Anton exclaimed. Some of the vampires towards the back chuckled as they heard this. This scout team was a little overkill in their mind. They were stronger vampires and a slightly bigger group. To top it off, they weren't alone, as there were an additional 3 members with them, although they weren't part of the hunting group. I need something to drink, can you guys stay next to us? One of the hunters shouted and asked. A thick set of vines were being pulled apart by a pair of hands, and soon a vampire wearing the guard uniform pushed through with a large bag on his back. Sorry, we were having a little trouble back there. Ronkin said, as he pulled a flask out of his pack and handed it over to the vampire. This flask didn't have any numbers on the side. Shortly afterwards, coming out through the opening that Ronkin had made, was Quinn, who also had a large bag on his back, as well as one more person, Nell. The 3 of them had been asked to help out with the scouting mission. The vampire hunting group honestly didn't know why, but there was more than just one vampire hunting group that was out there searching the planet right now, and they had been given a few guards to help them. Still, due to their 2 positions and the difference in strength, the guards were basically being used as bag holders, holding the supply of the others and marking their route while writing a report. The good news was the 3 guards weren't alone in this, and at least they had each other. Hey, I've never seen you this upset. Ronkin said, looking at Quinn. Do you miss the settlement that much? It hasn't even been a full day yet. We are going to be here for days, they said. Quinn replied. Days, Do you really think I want to be away from my family for days? To do what? To carry things. Quinn was never like this when they were on guard duty, and he wasn't the type to moan either, but he soon realized that he was missing his family life that he was enjoying quite a lot. At the same time, he was worried about Minnie. She had just started school, got into a commotion, and Quinn had said to her he would take her to school every day, and now he was out here, on a hunt for a few days. Of course, he wasn't too worried, because for one, Minnie was strong enough to fight nearly anyone, and she had her shadow ability that he could use to connect the two. But there was also the worry about his newborn. It was close, and that was something he certainly didn't want to miss. This should be quite a short task, Nell added. Besides, maybe this task can change our positions. Ronkin was nodding along as well. That's right. We are in the hunting team right now, even if we are guards. There could be a situation where we need to step in, and when that happens, if we prove ourselves, when they get back, maybe Anton will recommend us for better positions. This is a life-changing position for us. Quinn looked up into the sky as he imagined Minnie's face and squeezing her cheeks. He just was hoping that she was doing better at school now. Minnie had been dropped off at school by her mother. After Quinn had explained it was a request from the leader, Layla was insistent that he went on ahead, and that she could look after Minnie. After all, even with a big belly, the weight of a child didn't really affect her, and she was able to move just fine. The lessons went on well, and as with kids, there was always something new to talk about, and it seemed like the big thing was Minnie's father, and what she had done to Toby was quickly becoming forgotten about. What was a slight surprise, was that Toby was actually in the school today, but his mother wasn't the one that had brought him in, and instead it was his father. Not many expected that Toby's mother would come back to the school again after what had happened. Minnie and Abby were both still close to each other. They still hadn't tried to approach others, but what they did notice was that Toby no longer had anyone around him while in the park. Hi's group of friends were hanging out with each other, but they had shunned him for one reason or another. Others were also afraid to get close to him. They had seen he had a cruel side and were worried that maybe Minnie would act out as well. There was one thing about today that the students were looking forward to, and that was the fact that it would be their first practical lesson they were taking part in. After break, all students in the same grade as Minnie had been gathered in the outside training area. There were multiple dummies this time, just like they had out on the playground. Now, as this is your first lesson, I just want you guys to go out there and have some fun. A man with a potato-looking head said, swinging his arms. Use your physical abilities as a vampire to swing your fists, kick, bite, or do what you want. The instructor simply wanted to see what the little vampires could do, and since everyone was the same age, he didn't want them to worry about competition so much. The kids were excited as they hit the doll, whacking it, but it was more sturdy than it looked. The doll was sturdy, making it hard to be pushed all the way back, before it would rise again. However, the same couldn't be said for Minnie. She punched it in the chest, using her power to the limit that her father had set, and the doll bent backward, hitting the bottom of the floor before heading back up again. Wow! Did you see that? The other kids pointed, and started to talk about Minnie more and more. Shortly after the lesson had ended, many of the students were surrounding Minnie, asking her how she had managed to get so strong, but Minnie decided to ignore most of them and walk with Abby. They weren't interested in her before, so why would she be interested in them now? When lunch finally arrived and they were outside in the playground again, both Abby and Minnie were talking on the large log they sat on as usual, and that was when a certain someone started to walk toward them. Abby pulled in closer to Minnie, grabbing onto her shirt. "What are you doing here?" Minnie asked, almost baring her teeth. Toby stood there in front of the two of them. "I hope Mother's plan will work," Toby thought. He got on his knees, and bowed his head down. "I'm sorry for everything I did. I'm so sorry, please forgive me, and please. If it is possible, can we be friends?" Toby asked. Channel Red Novel Chapter 2029, Lies, Part 2. Many students wondered, would a single day go by without one of these two students doing something interesting? For one, vampires rarely bowed their heads to someone, unless they felt like they were above them. For them to get down on their knees as well, this was a big gesture, and here Toby was doing both to the two girls in front of him. "I'm sorry, I am so sorry for hitting both of you," Toby said again and again, and it sounded like his voice was on the verge of tears. "I'm just an idiot, I'm sorry for hurting your friend and both of you, but right now no one will talk to me," Toby said. "I hate it, and you Minnie, you're so strong I didn't even realize it. I deserved to be beaten that day. I deserved everything that happened to me." There was little sympathy coming from Minnie, although the one in front of her was young, she felt like he had made a big mistake, and even now Abby was still shaking because of his actions. However, Abby was slowly letting go of Minnie's arm, because the Toby she was looking at now, looked so fragile. Maybe this was all an act, but she could tell that a lot of the words he said, and the feelings that were coming through were true. "Maybe, we should forgive him, or give him a chance and just let him hang out with us," Abby suggested. "Are you crazy?" Minnie shouted back. "Did you forget what he did to you?" Abby shook her head. "I haven't, and I think he can pay us back this way by being nice to us from now on. Besides, as long as you're next to me, you can protect me, right?" Abby smiled. Abby was such a sweet girl, one that was full of innocence and fluff, that it was incredibly hard for Minnie to disagree with her, and Toby hadn't stopped his ramblings. "Please," Toby cried. "Be friends with me. I don't want to be alone." The last words, being alone, had struck a chord within Minnie. In this world, if no one had any friends, and no family, no one to talk to about anything, it was truly one of the most painful things, and living could be a miserable experience. "Okay," Minnie said. "I'm not saying you are our friend. Friends don't hurt each other, and you tried to hurt both of us. But you can hang out near us. The first thing is to get off the floor, everyone is staring at us and it's embarrassing." Toby lifted his head, and wiped away his tears. He looked back at his group of old friends before standing up. "It worked, just like Mom said it would." Toby smiled. "Thank you." The terrain for the hunting group wasn't getting any easier. The beautiful plants that were under their feet had now turned into thick vines, and they weren't sure whether they were imagining it or not, but it seemed like they were moving slightly, alive like a snake. As a test, one of the vampires cut one of the vines, and it snapped just like any other vine. There was no blood or black blood, so it didn't seem to be a type of beast of any kind. The good thing was that the area had opened up more and wasn't so condensed with trees, so there was free movement. "Everyone be careful." According to the last report, the other hunters had chased a beast into an area where the terrain changed and the ground was made of vines. "If I was to take a guess, we are close to where we need to be." There was a nervous chuckle from Ronkin, and he was sweating visibly from his face. "You should relax," Nell stated. "Look at you, a vampire sweating buckets from a simple hike. Your nerves are making your body act before you are even in the heat of battle. You should take more from Quinn. Look at him, he is as calm as a needle." "A needle?" Ronkin replied, but when looking at Quinn, it did seem like he was acting just the same as he would have done if they were walking around the city, as if it was a simple scouting job. Beep, everyone ready," Anton shouted. One of the beast scanners he was using had picked up on beasts in the area, but when looking around all they could see was plants, trees, and the vines on the ground. The strange trees started to bulge up from the bottom. They were bulging up like they were about to give birth, when they suddenly exploded, shooting out strange bark and a purple substance. The beasts that came out were human size, but looked nothing like a human. They had 4 legs on each side, similar to that of a spider, that were red in color. Then there were 2 smaller appendages that could only be described as hands that were on the sides of the beast's head. Their body was covered in a strange white fur, which was patchy in areas, and as usual with beasts, they had their razor-sharp teeth. There were multiples of them bursting from the trees. One tree seemed to have at least 3 of the beasts burst from it, and they immediately began to attack the vampires, leaping towards them. The hunting team used their vampire aura to try to slash through the beasts, and it had hit the beasts, clearly hurting them, but they weren't able to kill them in one hit. Emperor tier beast, at this level, the hunting team should be fine. Just as Quinn said that, he saw Anton thrust forward. His rapier had energy condensed to the tip of his weapon, and it stabbed right through the head of one. The ones I'm concerned about are the others. Quinn thought. Don't use your flasks, we are strong enough to deal with this. Save them. Anton shouted. Each member had been given a flask with Dalki blood, but Anton knew that these creatures weren't enough to take down the powerful vampires. Still, there were more of the beasts than there were vampires, and naturally, as more creatures burst out of the trees, they started to run towards the guards. Quinn was standing ahead of the other two, but that's when he noticed something. When running on their long legs, they were avoiding eye contact with Quinn. That's when all 3 of the beasts had run right past Quinn, as if he wasn't even there. What is this? Have even the beasts forgotten about who I am? Quinn thought, a little annoyed. Hey, should we take the flasks? Ronkin asked. The order from Anton wasn't for us as well, right? Nell had his hands held out wide, and when the beast leapt up to him, he moved and avoided the attack, and managed to climb on top of the beast and was punching away. For someone who didn't have much aura or strength as a vampire, he certainly was skillful, but the same couldn't be said for Ronkin, who had panicked. The beast leapt up and jumped, landing on top of Ronkin and pinning him to the ground, the 2 small hands by the side of its mouth held onto his shoulders. When it opened its mouth wide, Ronkin had no choice but to shove his hands into the beast's mouth. The teeth had sunk into his hands, but he had no choice as he was using his strength to pull its mouth apart. From the corner of his eye, Ronkin could see another creature was heading towards him. As for Nell, after gathering his vampire aura and forming it as a type of blade in his hand, he hit the back of the beast's head and neck, stabbing right through it and killing it in one go. Now he could see that Ronkin was in trouble. That idiot, you can't die here, you have a family. Nell shouted. The creature continued to scurry across the floor, until... Stop! A voice was heard, and the beast had done just that, not only the one running towards Ronkin, but the one on top of him as well. Ronkin wasn't sure, but it almost felt like the beast on top of him was shaking. It slowly turned its head, towards the voice that had spoken earlier. Get off him, Quinn said. Both of the beasts quickly obeyed, running deep into the strange forest, no longer taking part in the fight. Ronkin finally got up on his feet, and could see that the other vampires were still dealing with the creatures, but more were coming, yet none of them were coming towards the 3 guards anymore. Nell, who was a little to the side, was watching it all, and seeing it, he remembered a tale that Ronkin once told. After the little tournament battles they would face, Ronkin would often talk about his partner that he had, and there was one story that Nell believed he had exaggerated. Come on, that couldn't have happened. You're saying that a large beast had run up to the gates of the settlement, but when your partner stared at it, it decided to just run back away. It's a mere coincidence, my friend. The beast most likely could sense the leader's power and the power of all the vampires in here. Knowing that if it attacked it would meet its end. Beasts have quite good instincts. Nell remembered his own words while he looked at Quinn. Channel Red Novel Chapter 2030. The beasts respect all of the nearby trees in the area had already exploded, and the beasts that had come out from them had been dealt with as well. Lying in the grass and other areas were the beast bodies, some of them were starting to pile up on each other. As the fight went on, the vampires were learning of better ways to deal with the beasts, and thanks to Anton reorganizing the group, they were able to create somewhat of a circle where they could cover each other's backs. What was strange though, was it seemed almost as if the beasts were endless, because they were coming from far off in the distance and heading straight toward the group. Their only guesses were that the beasts were coming from further away, further than their eyes could see. However, there were 3 people that seemed completely unaffected by all of this, and that was the guards. Look at this, I told you that Quinn would be our good luck charm. Ronkin smiled and patted his friend on his back. The beasts are completely ignoring us and just going ahead to attack the others. It certainly was strange, but after what Nell had seen before, it was starting to make sense. Is it an ability perhaps? One that allows one to communicate with animals. The fifth family has that type of ability, but to be able to control it to this degree, it would have to be as strong as the leader's power itself. Huh, what luck is this? Ronkin kept smiling as he saw another beast run completely past them. Are you a Fortuna? This luck is amazing. In the end, the number of beasts were starting to dwindle, and soon they were no more. The vampires were victorious over what could only be described as a wave of beasts. They were tired, worn out, and had used a lot of their aura, and many of them had cuts and broken bones. The good news was that none of them had perished in the end. Good work everyone, we shall rest for the rest of the day. You all did well, and you should take the experience and use that for the next battle ahead of us. The vampires continued to trek through the vine-like area looking for some type of cover. A cave, or something, where they could rest and not get attacked. That's when the group had come across a gigantic tree. It was so large that looking up, one was unable to see the top, due to the other leaves that were covering it. The trunk was incredibly thick, and going around the whole tree would take a good while to walk around. What was most surprising was that there was an opening in the trunk, almost like an entrance or a tunnel similar to a cave. The vampires had scouted the planet before, and they knew that there was no civilization or other life other than that of the beasts, insects, and so on. Still, there were humanoid beasts and nest crystals which had high levels of intelligence. A trap, a setup, and getting beasts to work together were a trait of these things. Which was why Anton had sent the fastest vampire in the group, to go through the tree opening and see if there was anything. A few moments later, the vampire had returned. The place is completely empty inside. It's large area, and there are two other openings around the entire tree that both lead to the same large open area. The vampire reported. Anton thought about it for a while, and for now it was the most ideal location since they could place 3 guards at the opening of each entrance, taking turns while the group rested. Worst case, if it was some type of trap, the vampires would use their flasks to power themselves up and defeat the main cause of the problem in one go. The vampires entered the large empty tree, and they were able to set up sleeping beds, get some normal blood and other supplies that the guards had carried with them. Everyone was treating their wounds or focusing on their recovery, but one of the vampires named Stin, who had teased the guards before, had noticed something. "You 3 look awfully well," Stin commented. "Did the 3 of you just run off and hide until the fighting was over? Useless vampires." "What?" Ronkin shouted. "I was almost killed." "Killed? Yes, the few markings on all of your bodies show how much danger you were in," Stin stated, and the other vampires laughed, but from the look on their faces one could see that they were annoyed. Gritting his teeth, Ronkin wanted to say something, but Nell had stepped forward instead. "I can assure you, the 3 of us were by your side at all times. We didn't fight as many beasts as your group, and we were lucky in that regard. Shouldn't we just be happy that no one else was injured in this case?" "The man is right," Anton said. "Although the guards are not originally part of the hunting group, they are standing by our side during these dangerous times, so it's best that we all see this as one group rather than splitting it into them and us. Who knows, you might be relying on one of these to help you out in the future." Despite all of this, the guards could tell that they weren't welcome, so they had set up a base for themselves, a little away from all the others. "They treat us like crap even though we're carrying all their stuff. I should throw it all in the woods," Ronkin complained. Nell was trying his best to calm Ronkin down, while Quinn laid on the floor relaxing peacefully. That was until he suddenly lifted his body up from the ground. His ears had heard something off in the distance. "It's not my place to get involved," Quinn thought for a second. "Ah!" The sound of a scream for a brief second was heard from outside. Ronkin and the others were quickly on alert as they turned to where the sound was coming from, and they could see through the entrance they had come in from that a giant owl-like head had fitted through. Its eyes were completely black and something looking like some type of blood was dripping down onto its white ghost-like fur. "Why have you come here?" the owl beast stated. "Inspect, demon tier beast, a demon tier beast, in a place like this, the vampires, they won't be able to deal with this," Quinn thought. The good thing was, Anton hadn't told the others to attack yet. "We made sure never to attack where you have lived, so why have you come out here?" Under the owl's head every time it spoke part of its neck would slightly move up and down. "Our vampires," Anton replied. "They were hurt by beasts. We are here to find out what hurt them, and to stop the attacks close to our settlement." Since the beast had a level of intelligence, Anton was hoping they could come to a resolution, because he could tell immediately that this was a high-level beast. One that their group was unable to deal with. They would at least have to gather with the others or ask for help from the castles. "Is this why Edvard told me to come here?" "Because he knew there was a demon tier beast here, but if I help out, then everyone will know what I'm capable of. I thought we had a deal," Quinn thought. The owl kept turning its head a few times, and eventually spoke again. "Why don't you answer me? Why have you come here? What have we done to anger you?" the owl asked. Anton was beyond confused. He had just answered the owl. Did it not hear him? "Was it you who attacked the scout group?" Anton shouted. "Is there maybe a deal that we can come to?" Of course Anton didn't have any power to make any type of deal with the beast, and a vampire submitting to these creatures would never happen, but he just needed to buy time, or get the owl to leave somehow. "There has been no answer. In advance, I apologize for ignoring you." The owl started to move its head and soon it was completely out of the large tree. The vampires had collapsed, their legs buckled under the pressure. There was an immense amount of power that was coming off the beast that could be felt by them all. Thankfully, they had survived, and needed to know what they would do next. The group decided to still stay in the tree, but not for long, and while they were sitting down Nell had something on his mind, and he just had to ask. "That owl. I feel like it wasn't talking to us. Was it talking to you?" Nell asked, looking at Quinn. Thanks for watching and subscribe my channel.